border of the foot and is in relation to its medial margin with the lateral plantar vessels and nerves. It arises by a broad origin from the lateral process of the tuberosity of the calcaneus, from the undersurface of the calcaneus between the two processes of the tuberosity, from the forepart of the medial process, from the plantar aponeurosis, and from the intermuscular septum between it and the flexor digitorum brevis. Its tendon, after gliding over a smooth facet on the undersurface of the base of the fifth metatarsal bone, is inserted with the flexor digiti quinti brevis into the fibular side of the base of the first phalanx of the fifth toe. Variations. Slips of origin from the tuberosity at the base of the fifth metatarsal. Abductor ossus metatarsi quinti, origin external tubercle of the calcaneus, insertion into the tuberosity of the fifth metatarsal bone in common with or beneath the outer margin of the plantar fascia. The second layer, quadratus plantae and lumbricalis. The quadratus plantae, flexor accessorius, is separated from the muscles of the first layer by the lateral plantar vessels and nerve. It arises by two heads, which are separated from each other by the long plantar ligament. The medial or larger head is muscular and is attached to the medial concave surface of the calcaneus, below the groove which lodges the tendon of the flexor hallucis longus. The lateral head, flat and tendinous, arises from the lateral border of the inferior surface of the calcaneus, in front of the lateral process of its tuberosity, and from the long plantar ligament. The two portions join at an acute angle and end in a flattened band which is inserted into the lateral margin and upper and under surfaces of the tendon of the flexor digitorum longus, forming a kind of groove in which the tendon is lodged. It usually sends slips to those tendons of the flexor digitorum longus which pass to the second, third, and fourth toes. Variations. Lateral head often wanting, entire muscle absent. Variation in the number of digital tendons to which fibers can be traced. Most frequent offsets are sent to the second, third, and fourth toes, in many cases to the fifth as well, occasionally to two toes only. The lumbricalis are four small muscles, accessory to the tendons of the flexor digitorum longus, and numbered from the medial side of the foot. They arise from these tendons as far back as their angles of division, each springing from two tendons, except the first. The muscles end in tendons, which pass forward on the medial sides of the four lesser toes, and are inserted into the expansions of the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus on the dorsal surfaces of the first phalanges. Variations. Absence of one or more. Doubling of the third or fourth. Insertion partly or wholly into the first phalanges. The third layer. Flexor hallucis brevis, adductor hallucis, flexor digiti quinti brevis. The flexor hallucis brevis arises by a pointed tendinous process from the medial part of the undersurface of the cuboid bone, from the contiguous portion of the third cuneiform, and from the prolongation of the tendon of the tibialis posterior, which is attached to that bone. It divides in front into two portions, which are inserted into the medial and lateral sides of the base of the first phalanx of the great toe, a sesamoid bone being present in each tendon at its insertion. The medial portion is blended with the abductor hallucis previous to its insertion, the lateral portion of the adductor hallucis. The tendon of the flexor hallucis longus lies in a groove between them. The lateral portion is sometimes described as the first interosseous plantaris. Variations. Origin subject to considerable variation. It often receives fibers from the calcaneus or long plantar ligament. Attachment to the cuboid, sometimes wanting. Slip to first phalanx of second toe. The adductor hallucis, adductor obliquus hallucis, arises by two heads, oblique and transverse. The oblique head is a large, thick, fleshy mass crossing the foot obliquely and occupying the hollow space under the first, second, third, and fourth metatarsal bones. It arises from the bases of the second, third, and fourth metatarsal bones and from the sheath of the tendon of the peroneus longus, and is inserted together with the lateral portion of the flexor hallucis brevis, into the lateral side of the base of the first phalanx of the great toe. The transverse head, transversus pedis, is a narrow, flat fasciculus which arises from the plantar metatarsophalangeal ligaments of the third, fourth, and fifth toes, sometimes only from the third and fourth, and from the transverse ligament of the metatarsus. It is inserted into the lateral side of the base of the first phalanx of the great toe, its fibres blending with the tendon of insertion of the oblique head. Variations: slips to the base of the first phalanx of the second toe, opponens hallucis, occasional slips from the adductor to the metatarsal bone of the great toe. The abductor, flexor brevis, and adductor of the great toe, like the similar muscles of the thumb, give off, at their insertions, fibrous expansions to blend with the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus. The flexor digiti quinti brevis, flexor brevis minimi digiti, lies under the metatarsal bone of the little toe, and resembles one of the interossei. It arises from the base of the fifth metatarsal bone, and from the sheath of the perioneus longus. Its tendon is inserted into the lateral side of the base of the first phalanx of the fifth toe. Occasionally, a few of the deeper fibres are inserted into the lateral part of the distal half of the fifth metatarsal bone. These are described by some as a distinct muscle, the opponens digiti quinti. The fourth layer, interossei. The interossei in the foot are similar to those in the hand, with this exception, that they are grouped around the middle line of the second digit instead of that of the third. They are 7 in number and consist of 2 groups, dorsal and plantar. The interossei dorsalis, dorsalis interossei, 4 in number, are situated between the metatarsal bones. They are bipeniform muscles, each arising by 2 heads from the adjacent sides of the metatarsal bones between which it is placed. Their tendons are inserted into the bases of the first phalanges, and into the aponeurosis of the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus. In the angular interval left between the heads of each of the 3 lateral muscles, one of the perforating arteries passes to the dorsum of the foot. Through the space between the heads of the first muscle, the deep plantar branch of the dorsalis pedis artery enters the sole of the foot. The first is inserted into the medial side of the second toe. The other 3 are inserted into the lateral sides of the second, third, and fourth toes. The interossei plantaris, plantar interossei, 3 in number, lie beneath rather than between the metatarsal bones, and each is connected with but one metatarsal bone. They arise from the bases and medial sides of the bodies of the third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal bones, and are inserted into the medial sides of the bases of the first phalanges of the same toes, and into the aponeuroses of the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus. Nerves. The flexor digitorum brevis, the flexor hallucis brevis, the abductor hallucis, and the first lumbricalis are supplied by the medial plantar nerve. All the other muscles in the sole of the foot by the lateral plantar. The first interosseus dorsalis frequently receives an extra filament from the medial branch of the deep perineal nerve on the dorsum of the foot, and the second interosseus dorsalis a twig from the lateral branch of the same nerve. Actions. All the muscles of the foot act upon the toes, and may be grouped as abductors, adductors, flexors, or extensors. The abductors are the interossei dorsalis, the abductor hallucis, and the abductor digiti quinti. The interossei dorsalis are abductors from an imaginary line passing through the axis of the second toe, so that the first muscle draws the second toe medialward toward the great toe. The second muscle draws the same toe lateralward, and the third and fourth draw the third and fourth toes in the same direction. Like the interossei in the hand, each assists in flexing the first phalanx and extending the second and third phalanges. The abductor hallucis abducts the great toe from the second and also flexes its proximal phalanx. In the same way, the action of the abductor digiti quinti is 2